Oh, good morning, Ocean Rangers, and thanks for joining us for another Summer Kids Club. My name is Kaya. I am coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific. And this morning, we're going to be talking all about an animal that you probably think of when you first think of aquariums. That's right, fish, and all of the amazing adaptations that they have. Now, while you're watching, if you feel like texting in any questions or observations you're making, or maybe you have a favorite fish you would like to tell me about, you can text us at 562-286-1838. I have Carrie, who's at the computer, ready to take those questions and pass them on to me. And then I also have Cynthia in the studio here, who is ready to make all of the magical things happen behind me. Now, if you're watching this later, if you missed our live program, you're still welcome to participate. Feel free to email us at live at lbaop.org, and somebody will be sure to get back to you. And of course, you can always just share your observations with a family member, or maybe write them down, draw them, any way you feel like participating. Okay, my friends, my ocean rangers, let's start thinking about fish. How do we know a fish is a fish? What exactly are those unique features that fish have? Any thoughts? Let's take a look at some of the ones we have here. This, by the way, is our blue cavern exhibit. This is a live webcam. So if you just can't get enough fish in your life, then I recommend putting this or one of our other webcams up, and you can watch them swimming around. So let's take a look. How are these fish able to live underwater in the way that they do? And I also want to bring up that this is one of the most diverse groups of vertebrates or animals with bones on the planet. That's right. There's about 30,000 types of fish out there that we know of right now. And there could be even more that we haven't even discovered yet. So what is it that makes them so unique? How are they able to survive in so many different habitats? Why are there so many of them? So the first thing I'm noticing as I'm taking a look at these blue cavern, first of all, I haven't even introduced our guest here. I'm so used to seeing him, but maybe you aren't. That's one of our giant sea bass. We have a few of them here, which is a huge fish that lives off of our coast here in California that can get up to 500 pounds. That's right, who just likes to hang out. But something I'm noticing is how these fish are able to swim. How are they able to move through the water? I mean, what parts of their body do they have? Do they have wings? No, right? Do they have arms and legs like we do? No, they have fins. So they have a number of different fins that help them swim. So one of their fins that is notable is their caudal tail or their tail fin. And you can see how they move it. Move it back and forth just like this. That's what gives them power through the water. We can just imagine this one's moving its fin pretty strongly to get close to the camera. And that's actually a really great view of their other fins that they have. They have fins on the side of their body too, just like this, kind of like airplane wings, right? So those are called their pectoral fins or side fins, and that is what allows fish to swim, steer, turn through the water. Sharks have very distinctive pectoral fins. They really use them kind of like airplane wings, right? They sort of glide on them. But that's what allows them to steer. And then they have a number of fins underneath their body as well, like their pelvic and anal fins that also aid them in keeping their balance. Oh, hello, big guy. We can also get a great look at their faces. So fish also have eyes and mouths, just like we do. Most fish. Some fish, there's always going to be exceptions, right? And I wonder if we can get a good look at how these fish are able to breathe. How do they breathe underwater? So they have gills, which I'm not going to be able to show, but they're right over here. They're along the sides of their body. So instead of lungs, they have a part of their body called gills, which allows them to extract oxygen out of the water. And the reason why we don't always see those gills is because they have a special flap over them called an operculum that helps keep them safe. It's a nice bony plate that protects their gills from the world around them. Oh, and Becca is asking, how do fish get rid of waste? Oh, that's a great question, kind of like we do. So they do have a mouth and another side of their body, and that's where the waste comes out. So it goes through their system just like us, and it goes out into the water. Great question, Becca. Thanks for tuning in this morning. I'm glad you're joining us, Ocean Ranger. All right, so we talked about their fins, we talked about their gills. What else do fish have that make them unique? So one thing I'm thinking of is what is covering their bodies? What is all over them? Do they have hair like we do? No. Do they have fur like an otter? Nope. What about feathers like a bird? Are they covered in feathers? No, they are covered in scales. That's right. Similar to other reptiles, although they are not a reptile, they also have scales just like them. And scales are a very helpful covering for being able to live under the water. Scales are they can be lots of different sizes and actually made of different materials too. But in general, they're a nice hard covering, kind of like our fingernails that layer all over the fish's body. So you can kind of see them sort of shimmering here on our giant sea bass there. And it's a very hard protective covering. And again, it's layered, which really allows them to turn. Perfect. You can see the scales on our angelfish here very, very clearly. And again, we can see that some fish have very, very colorful scales. This is a tropical fish, lives in an area with lots of coral, which is more colorful. So that's why fish in these areas tend to have more brightly colored scales, unlike our giant sea bass. But we can see, like here, blending into our kelp forest, we can sort of see those tiny little scales there, right? Now, the reason why these scales are such a great covering for being able to live underwater is because of how, one, they're hard, they're pretty hard, so it's a nice protective layer from other animals that might like to eat any fish. Not many predators of the giant sea bass, but in general, it's a protective covering. And then also, if you think about our skin, what happens when we go in water for too long, what happens? It gets really pruny, right? Really soft. It's not really meant to be in water for extended periods of time. Things like that don't happen with these scales. That really keeps their bodies nice and safe. So it's a great covering for being able to live underwater. And then, of course, one of their last things that I have to mention, another feature of fish, is their bones. So they do have bones on the inside of their bodies, just like we do. They're vertebrates. They have a backbone. If you touch your backbone, fish have them as well. And they are, of all of the vertebrates out there, so us, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish are the most diverse, again, with those 30,000 out there. So they are incredibly well adapted because they've diversified so much. Any questions or observations you'd like to share? I'd love to hear them. Maybe you have a favorite fish you'd like to tell me about. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of my favorite fish here in the studio. And that number again is 562-286-1838. Now, there's one other feature of fish that I'd like to talk about that's harder to see when you're just watching them swim around, but it is a feature that all fish have, including sharks, and it's the thing that allows some fish to be able to school together. Have you ever seen that happen? A fish that schools together in a big group? Yeah, so how are they able to do that? I want you to think about that. And in the meantime, I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came into our studio from Kaden. Hi, Kaden. Thanks for watching. Kaden is wondering, what's a giant grouper look like? Ooh, good question. So we do have a giant grouper here at the aquarium that lives in our tropical exhibit. I'm going to ask for a little bit of help from my colleagues who might know a little bit more. I believe this is a Queensland grouper. And I'm told that it can get to be 9 feet long when they are fully grown. And somebody help me out. How much can they weigh? About 700 to 800 pounds. Kaden, that is a huge fish out there, right? So we'll take a look at ours if we can find it. I think Cynthia taking a look to see if we can find some footage of it. And when we get to take a look at it, I want you to think about what it eats and how it eats, because I think this might be one of my favorite things about this fish. And it's actually pretty similar to our sea bass that we were looking at in our blue cavern as well. You can tell so much about a fish and how it lives, like where it lives. Does it live out in the open ocean, or does it like to hide? By looking at its body shape. You can tell a lot about a fish and what it eats by looking at its mouth. For example, what direction is the mouth facing? If it's facing upwards, that probably means it eats things that are right above it. If it's facing forward, that probably means it's going to chase after its food or just eat things directly in front of it. Or is it facing downwards? Does it eat things off the bottom of the ocean? And I'm bringing this up because of the way that our grouper eats and also our giant sea bass. They have these really big mouths that allow them to act like vacuum cleaners. That's right. We call them ambush predators because this is a very, very big fish. You can also tell a lot about the speed of a fish by looking at the shape of its body. So really fast fish tend to look like footballs. Have you ever seen a football? They have like the 2 points on the end. And that's called, oh, I'm blanking on it right now. I'm going to think of it. Don't worry, that body shape. Fusiform. Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, it's a fusiform shape. So fish like that, like our like tuna, is a good example. They have a very distinct sort of fusiform shape, and they're really fast. Let's see. Let's find it. It's all the way in the back over here. Yeah. So here's our grouper over here, who's kind of blending in back there. And we don't have a great look at the size, but we do have one here. And Caden, if you ever want to watch, this is our tropical reef camera. So this is a look at our tropical exhibit here at the aquarium, our largest exhibit. This is 350,000 gallons of water. It is huge. And you can watch this yourself. And actually, Cynthia's, what she's doing is taking a look to see if we can find a good image of it. So this is something you can do at home. If you ever want to see what is our grouper up to, what are they up to this morning, you can do this yourself. And we can see, what does it look like? It's kind of grayish here. So not super colorful like a lot of the other fish that we see here. That's okay. All right. Well, we can come back to our tropical exhibit and see if we can get a better look at it. In the meantime, we can talk about how those fish are able to school. What is that feature that allows them to do this? So all fish have this on their body, what we call a lateral line. It's like a line of these special pores along their scales that goes the whole length of their body. So here is a school of Barracuda. So this type of fish, they will school together, be in a big group, and that lateral line that I was talking about is kind of visible right here. It's not always visible on fish, but some it's very, very distinctive. I would say on schooling fish, it's especially distinctive. Now, what does this allow them to do? This is the special line. This line allows fish to detect water movement and water pressure. So that means they can sense movement around them. And that's how schooling fish are able to stay together and move in what looks like perfectly together in the exact same direction. So a lot of times people will ask me, how are they able to do that? And really, if any of the schooling fish start to move, it can be any of them, there's typically not like a leader of the fish, then the whole school will move along right with them. And it also allows them to sense the distance from one another so they can space themselves out exactly how they want to. Pretty neat, right? Now, all fish do have this. So even if they aren't a schooling fish, then this is a feature that all fish have that help them, most fish that I can think of anyways, that allow them to sense, predators that might be nearby, or on the flip side, prey that they would like to chase. So it is a very helpful sense to have out in the ocean. Okay, my friends, so we've talked about some fish features and some unique adaptations. For our next 10 minutes or so before we wrap up, I would like to talk about a couple of very unique fish that we have, some that we have here at the aquarium and some that are just out in the ocean that I think are pretty cool. Oh, Shinja, you are wondering, why is it called a school of fish? And I don't have an answer for that. I think that's just a name that we gave a group of fish. There's other terms for groups of animals, like a group of whales is called a pod. So I'm sure the scientists that discovered, that fish sometimes move in big groups had a reason for calling it a school of fish. Maybe it was like a school of students or something like that. But if there's a specific reason, I don't know it. But Shinja, I love that you're thinking about that. I don't know. There's also a specific term for sharks and rays. So lots of groups of animals have special names. Flock of birds. It's just, I don't know, they have these names. Great question. All right, so the first fish that I would like to talk about that I think is pretty unique is actually the largest bony fish out there. And this fish can get even bigger than our grouper and our giant sea bass. Now, this is a fish that I also think looks really funny. I also think it happens to be kind of cute. But you tell me what you think. The mola mola. Do you recognize this fish? It looks really weird, right? It's also called a sunfish. But yes, this fish is the largest type of bony fish out there in a couple of different ways. So we see these fins that they have here. Now, we talked about the different types of fins that fish have. So these mola molas have pretty unique fins. Their fins have changed over time, so they look a lot different than most fish out there. So first of all, do you see a tail here? No, right? They don't have a tail. They don't have a caudal tail. They've lost it over time. All of those other fins that they have, like the dorsal, pectoral, those anal, pelvic fins, over time, they've all fused into these two fins here. And that is what they use to swim. They're kind of like a rudder. So they have them like this, and they just kind of move like this throughout the water. They are pretty awkward swimmers. And a lot of times this fish will spend time at the surface. And I'll talk a little bit about why in a moment. But if you see that fin, you might think that's the dorsal fin of a shark. They're pretty, a lot of times they can get confused. But once you watch it swim a little bit more, they do use them differently than a shark. And here we can see it at the surface here. So we can see it sort of peeking its fin out there. Now, as the largest fish, what I mean by that is the length from the tip of that fin all the way down to that one can be 11 feet across. That is a really big fish. And how much do you think they can weigh? So the largest ones out there have been recorded to be 5,000 pounds, my friends. 5,000 pounds. That is a huge mola mola fish. Now, there's 3 subspecies of the sunfish, the mola molas. They're found in waters worldwide, and the largest ones that I was just talking about are the Japanese, or found near Japan. So they don't all get to be this size. We do find them here off of our coast. I believe this is one that was taken a picture of on one of our whale watching trips here, I think. So yeah, the ones that we see don't tend to get to be that big, but in general, they all are a pretty big fish. Now, why are they up here at the surface? So this is not my favorite fact about them, but I do feel like it's important to share. This fish is also known for getting a lot of parasites on them, unfortunately. And the way that they deal with this is they will hang out at the surface where lots of, just like this one, sort of flattened out, basking in the sun. And they have a relationship with lots of other birds. So birds will actually come and land on them. They're very flat fish. They're kind of compressed, and so they're able to like lay out like a pancake, and birds will help them out by eating any of those parasites that they have on their body. So luckily they are able to get rid of them in that way. Oh, Concha is wondering, what do they eat? Good question. They are omnivores, believe it or not. So an omnivore is an animal that will eat both plants and animals. So they'll eat whatever they can find, really. I don't know if they're more carnivorous or herbivorous, like which one they prefer. I think they tend to be more carnivores, but they will eat anything. So things they might eat, other small fish, they'll eat, small crustaceans, any squid that they can find. Those are some examples of some smaller animals that they might eat as well. All right, my friends. So that is our mola mola. Now let's spend 2 minutes, our last few minutes together talking about my favorite tropical fish here. So this is a temperate fish, right? This one is found more off of our coast, and we can kind of tell just by looking at its coloration. It's not as brightly colored that we see for many of our tropical fish. But I would love to highlight the parrotfish. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's so cute. Looks like he's smiling, saying hello to all of you ocean rangers. But why is this called a parrotfish? Does this look like a parrot? So the answer is all in these teeth right here. So they have these very special teeth that have fused together. So it's like having one big teeth or a beak, just like a parrot. And why do they need this beak? What exactly are they eating? So my friends, this is an herbivore. So they eat mostly algae, but the algae that they tend to eat grows on coral. So it's pretty helpful for the coral because if coral has algae growing all over it, that's not very good for it. It's not able to photosynthesize and feed itself. So the parrotfish is doing a service to the coral reef and eating the algae, and they're also sometimes eating the coral as well. And that coral is very, very strong. So they need that special beak, and they even have special teeth in their throats that help them process that coral. And then one comes out on the other end. I can't remember who asked about fish poop, but with the parrotfish, when they poop out the coral they've eaten, it comes out as tropical sand. That's right. If you've ever gone to a tropical beach and enjoyed all of that sand, you can thank a parrotfish for that, or at least for some of it. Parrotfish are known to poop up to 200 pounds of sand a year. That's a lot. And that also means they're eating a lot of coral. Now, the reason why it's actually okay for the coral reefs to have a parrotfish sometimes eating them is, one, it's not always live coral it's eating. Sometimes it'll eat coral that's already died of natural causes. But by creating space on the coral reef from eating, they're actually allowing new coral to grow in. So in a lot of ways, they are considered coral reef engineers because they're creating space for all of these new things to grow. So they're very helpful for the coral reef in that way. Now, the one last sort of thing about these parrotfish that I think is pretty fun is how they sleep. So when they go to bed every night, they get into a nice little sleeping bag of snot. That's right. They actually blow out a giant bubble of mucus all around their body that they spend the night in. How does that sound? Would you like to have a sleepover and some snot? Cynthia is saying yes. Well, you don't have to invite me to that sleepover, okay? That's okay. I'll pass on that. Yeah, Carrie is saying no. But remember we were talking about parasites, like with our mola mola, which had the parasites. And their way of dealing with it is going up to the surface. So the parrotfish way of dealing with it is by protecting themselves in a mucus covering. So that way at night, they don't have to worry about any parasites bothering them. There are things in the ocean, kind of like mosquitoes that we have. And so this is their way of protecting themselves from that. And then in the end, in the morning, I think a lot of times they'll actually gobble up that mucus again. It's like a nice little morning snack, little breakfast. Yeah, no, thank you. That's okay. That's not how I'd like to start my day. But you know what? Everybody to their own. Everybody has to survive out in the coral reef, right? All right, my ocean rangers, thanks for joining me for this program all about fish. I hope you learned a little bit more about what makes fish unique and some of the really cool fish out there in the ocean. I really appreciate you texting in those questions. And tomorrow we have another great program at 11 that's about another group of fish, sharks. That's right. So if you have questions about sharks, I would start writing them down. Get ready for that class because it'll be a great program. We do have more programs this afternoon if anybody would like to tune in for some more Summer Kids Club programming. And if not, we'll see you next time. Have a great day.